Well, I think we've got lots of people on board this evening. I can see lots of faces. Well, hello and welcome, my fellow door openers. Welcome to our October Open the Doors Global Online Meeting. And we are very excited to introduce our guest presenter today, someone who has brought a true gift to our world in the work of deep, meaningful connection with those who we fear are no longer reachable. And of course, that is the great Vicki de Klerk, and she will talk and speak to us about the work of the Validation Institute. But first, before we begin, please join me in acknowledging the traditional custodians on the lands on which we gather here today. For me, I sit in Awabakal land. We acknowledge our First Nations people and their deep, continued connection to country and culture. We pay our respects to the elders past, present and future, to their ancestors, descendants, as well as our own. We also acknowledge our friends who are living with dementia and commit to advocating with them as we strive to ensure that they live a humane, meaningful, connected and meaningful manner. So, what is Open the Doors? I'm so glad you asked. Open the Doors is a space that is not only for us to express how we feel about the changes needed for dementia and aged care generally, but a place for us all to share our amazing work with our global online community. It's a space where we no longer want to work in silos, but where we can connect with our global thought leaders, with people living with dementia, care partners and families living beside dementia, innovators, disruptors, troublemakers, designers, and of course, looking at new meaningful models of care. I would like to introduce you to our guest presenter, Vicki de Klerk. Now, I'd also like to say that I've been inspired by the power of validation therapy as I first witnessed it on film by your mother, Naomi Feil. And I was stunned. And initially I thought, oh my God, this is too much. And I was really confronted. And the person showing me the clip said, wait a minute, watch. And as the breakthrough came, I was mesmerised and I was really taken with the capacity for your mother to connect and for the work that you guys continue to do. So a little bit about Vicki de Klerk. Vicki is the Executive Director of the Validation Training Institute, and she's a certified validation master teacher. She is the author of Validation Techniques for Dementia Care and Validation for First Responders. And together with her mother, Naomi Feil, the founder of the Validation Method, Vicki has co-authored the revisions of Validation, the Feil Method, and also the Validation Breakthrough. Now, Vicki holds a BFA from Boston University, an MBA from Fordham University, and is a Dutch-trained registered nurse. Dankjewel. Since 1989, Vicki has given validation workshops, lectures, and training programs around the world. Please, a big rousing welcome to Vicki de Klerk.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Well, I really want to start by talking about my mom. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Everything's good?
There's lots of thumbs there.
Yeah. Can you go to the first slide, please? Next slide. Next slide. Yeah, there we go. That's my mom. My mom was born in Munich, Germany, and in 1932, which was a lousy time for Jewish people to be in Munich. So about 4 years later, when she was 4 years old, her mom and her sister and herself fled Germany and went to the United States, where my grandfather had gotten a job as the director of a very large Jewish nursing home in Cleveland, Ohio. And what you see in the middle photo is my mom as a young girl standing in the living room of the nursing home, because that is indeed where they lived. She grew up in the home, 5 rooms right across from the residence. That's her as a somewhat older teenager sitting in front of the Montefiore home. She left Cleveland and got her social work degree at Columbia University. There she met my dad and got married. She always had a dream of being an actress, and what you see on the lower right is her very glamorous photo, which she hoped would get her parts. But she had two little kids, so she couldn't really go on the road with a show. Next slide, please. So she gave it up. Well, the marriage fell apart. She gave up her dream of being a famous actress, and she went back home to her parents, who were still working at the Montefiore Home for the Aged in Cleveland. And she went back to work in the place where she grew up, in the home. She met Ed File. There you see in the upper left, Ed and Mimi in an old picture. And she started working with what they then called the senile psychotic. That was the name that was used. And it was a closed wing. And she started to experiment. Now, the thing about my mom is she was extremely bright and academic. She could write an academic paper, she could study, she was curious. She read everything about, well, all the newest trends in psychology. And she started to integrate different ideas from all over into her work. She knew old people because she grew up with them. They had informed her entire life choices. So she made things up, and it was in the practice that the validation method developed. It wasn't a theoretical exercise. By the time she had something that worked, people would say, well, what is that based on? And she would go, oh, well, Freud's theory and Erickson's theory. So the theory came second to the practice. And I think that's important because the validation method is a practical method. It's something that has to be learned in the hands and in the heart more than in the head. It is the how we do things in our field, in geriatrics. It's how do we approach another human being, whether they're oriented or not. At any rate, to go back to my mom, she got asked to go on the road and do a workshop here, a presentation there. And at first she said no, because she had two little boys at home, my brothers. And then Ed said to her, no, you should go, you should do it. So she started going out and doing these workshops. And one thing led to another. And by the time she did her last workshop in 2017, she had done over 2,000 workshops worldwide. She carried the validation method in her suitcase on the road. In the beginning, schlepping 16 millimeter films. And then, of course, it went to VCRs. And then it went to DVDs. And then it went to sticks, but she never got that far. That was a technology she couldn't adapt to. She worked up until the last month of her life, which was December 2023. And her last presentation was online in a webinar with Michael Verde, actually. He hosted her every month for the last year of her life. And that was extremely important to her. Next slide, please. If there are any questions or anything, you've got to let me know, okay? Now, everybody knows the Naomi and Gladys video. Ed stayed with her. They lived together. He developed cognitive decline in his last years. And she was a brilliant caregiver, as you might imagine, providing him with everything he needed. Her 90th birthday is in the middle. She lived to be 91 years old. She traveled the world. Next slide, please. What is the validation method? What did she create? Well, I said simply, validation is a method for connecting and communicating with older adults. But a lot of people don't really understand what validation, the depth of validation. It's not just this empathetic, warm, honest attitude. That is certainly critical. But if you do these verbal and nonverbal techniques without having the attitude, they're not going to work very well. They're going to be dry and sterile. And if you have the attitude and the techniques integrated so you don't need to think about them, but you're doing it for the wrong reason, they're also not going to work. People react to too much questioning with, what do you want to know? Why are you asking me all these questions? So it's very important to have that balance between, why am I doing validation, choosing the moments when I do it, centering myself, and I'm going to do a couple of exercises with you guys if we have time, because validation is a practical method and you are all working in the field. So I want to give you a couple of takeaways. At any rate, I think it's very important for everybody to understand the full depth of the method. It's more than just this attitude. It's a theory and it's a practice. Next slide, please. So what does validation give you as a practitioner? And what did nope, there you go, that's it. What did my mom do that was so unique? Well, way back in 1982, she wrote in her very first book, "We have to cross the street to their reality." Nobody said that at that time. And what she did was she triggered a wave of more humanistic care in our field. She predated everybody. And so I like to call her the godmother of person-centered care. She used empathy. And when I say empathy, I mean emotive empathy. She went into the emotions of the other person. And she connected with basic human needs. She pulled together all those techniques from this method and that method and the other method and put them together so that we can communicate with people who are verbal, with people who are nonverbal, and validation can be used individually, but also in group work. And in fact, validation was first developed in groups. So a lot of people don't know about that group validation is a thing, and it's magnificent. You wouldn't believe what comes out of the mouths of these people. Okay, next slide, please. In the last months of her life, after she got her diagnosis, she was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer in October of 23, and she died on Christmas Eve of the same year. So it was pretty quick. And she and I talked on Zoom because she lived in Oregon and I live in the Netherlands. So Zoom was our friend. And we talked about many, many things. And what I found remarkable was how she moved through the process of resolution, coming to peace in a very conscious, mindful way, through our conversations. I promised her that I would continue her legacy. That she was worried about that. Will people remember the validation method? And when we set up a website dedicated to her and asked people in the validation community to respond, how has validation affected you? And within 2-3 days, we got hundreds of responses. And so even though she was in her final phases, we would have, she would be read the responses. And I can't tell you how important that was, because by the end of her life, the last week, she was able to say, I know it's going to carry on. So it was me, it was the entire validation community that helped her find peace. And if you go to the next slide, there's an embedded video that I wanted to share with you. Nope, before, yeah, there. Should be. Did it work?
The video is not playing.
Oh.
We can share it in the newsletter, Vicki.
Okay.
I tried to source it.
Or try the link, maybe, Sanal. Yeah.
There it is. That's it.
Ah.
A funny question for you.
Okay.
When you do die,
Yeah.
what should we say to all the people who love you? What should we say to the validation community?
That Naomi died knowing that the validation community will continue her work. Validation will not be lost, but it will be practiced by workers throughout the world. And it will benefit very old people who have a memory loss, that the word dementia will not be used so much, rather memory loss. And Naomi wants to thank you all for continuing in her footsteps. And it made her fear her death be a joy rather than a sadness, but a joy that people understood her work, did not misunderstand it, but understood it and continued in her footsteps with her energy and spirit.
Okay. Thank you so much for finding that, Sonal. I really appreciate it. Very quickly, what is VTI doing with her legacy? We've been creating tips sheets, helping younger people find ways to connect and communicate with parents, grandparents, people on the street. Next slide. We've created a family caregiver course that's specially for the needs of families, because it's different. A professional has different needs than a family member, and they need different information and they need different types of skills. So, like in the validation method, when we try to go to the needs of the other, When we develop training, we try to go to the needs of the user, and that's extremely important to us. Next, please. Next slide. I believe the next one is our validation for medical professionals, which we tested out last year. It was successful. We tweaked it, and now we're running it again. Medical professionals needs different information and skill. They don't need different skills, but they need it presented in a different way. And that's so much fun. I have to tell you, I'm teaching that particular course, and I really enjoy it. Next slide, please. What I do want to say is, that's really the end of my presentation. If you want to contact me directly, there's my email address. You're welcome to. Okay, let's turn off the slides, and I realize I have 5 more minutes, and I promised you some skills. So, centering in the validation method is the ability to clear yourself. And by that, I mean your thoughts and your feelings, not forever and ever, and you're not repressing the feelings or thoughts. What I like to think of is I have a little like locker, and I take my thoughts and feelings and I put them in the locker, and I close the door, and I hold on to the key. Because when I'm done, I need to go back and get my thoughts and feelings because they're mine. They're not lost. But when I validate, I cannot be filled with, oh my God, I've got to buy this at the supermarket before on my way home. And the kids are really bothering me. And, my husband hasn't helped. And now I'm going to validate. I can't connect to another human being when I'm busy with myself. So for the moment, and you choose those moments, and you cannot do it 24/7. You pick 5 minutes here, 10 minutes there, when you choose. So think of a color, please, that gives you energy. A color that sort of feels like, I got resources. And imagine that color is filling the air around you. Now, I'm going to close my eyes. You are welcome to keep your eyes open or closed as you wish. I like it when my feet are on the ground and I can feel the earth rather than crossing my legs. And I want to let my body sink into wherever I am, whether it's a bed or a chair. And I want to breathe in through my nose and exhale through my mouth. And every time I breathe in, I'm taking that energy-giving color into my body. And when I exhale, it's moving through my body down to fill my toes. And with each breath, you take in the color, send it through your body, filling it up, your legs, your hips, your belly, your chest, your shoulders. Fill your arms and your hands and your wrists and your fingertips. And fill your head with this energy-giving color. And when you feel that your body is filled with color and your energy is there, slowly come on back, open your eyes. That will tell me that you're back. Now, if that exercise worked for you, great. I strongly suggest that you do it every day for 2-3 minutes a day so that it becomes automatic. Now, because I do that exercise all the time, because I'm visual and I really enjoy the color, all I have to do is think of the color and I suddenly feel my tailbone. And it's setting an anchor is what it is. Now, if that exercise did not work for you, I really am very sorry. And that's okay. You don't have to respond to a visual exercise. But on our website, on the YouTube channel, there's a kinesthetic exercise, an auditory exercise. Find the one that works best for you. Everybody, this is one of the principles of validation. Every human being is unique and worthwhile. And that's not just for the disoriented, it's also for you and me and everybody in the world. Everybody is different. So I want to offer you different ways to find your center. And you can do that on the YouTube channel. Arun, you raised your hand.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Vicki. My name is Aaron. Thank you so much for an insightful presentation. I have got a question. So validation techniques often originates from the Western culture, culture context. So us, Australia being a multicultural country, how do we adapt the techniques to effectively address the needs of individual coming from culturally diverse background, ensuring that the validation is culturally sensitive and inclusive?
That's a great question. We have training centers in 14 different countries: China, Japan, the Middle East, as well as the Western world. So, yeah, we understand about cultural diversity. I personally have lived in 5 different countries. I've taught in all these countries. I get it. You know what's really interesting? As people become very old and their brain changes naturally with age, because the brain changes just like my hair and my eyes and my kidneys and my bladder, it gets worse. So my short-term memory gets worse. And if that process continues, for instance, if I've drunk a lot of alcohol and burned enough brain cells, or if I'm highly stressed throughout my whole life and that has burned out too many brain cells, and it hits certain parts of my brain that control social controls, right? That can happen. So what happens is my basic human needs and the universal emotions come flowing out. And it doesn't matter whether you're an Aboriginal or a university professor from Harvard. You still got those basic human needs, and you still got the universal emotions. And that's where we need invalidation. It's both culturally sensitive and not, because older adults, when they lose socialization, that is learned behavior. What makes us different is learned behavior. I think that's really important to recognize. The biggest change I had to make in validation training was when I was teaching in the Middle East. I could not get people to lie on the ground. They just would not do it. So I had to adjust my exercises to sitting. That was the biggest change. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. Thank you, Vicki. I might just hand over to Aaron to channel and curate all the questions and raised hands. Thank you, Aaron. That was a really good question. And thanks for your answer, Vicki. So do we have any more questions in that chat there, Aaron, that you can say?
No, we don't have any questions per se. We just got one statement, which is lovely. So I'll just read that out, Vicki. Just a statement from Inequalities, I believe. Her legacy and validation method will never be forgotten. I use her, Gladys Wilson's, frequently in my teaching. She was a pioneer and a huge influence on the way in which we think about people living with dementia. Forever grateful for Naomi. And that's the Gladys Wilson video was meant to be the piece there at the end. Sorry. Monique just put in beautiful smile, and I agree, Monique. And it was just beautiful hearing all of that, Vicki. It was absolutely lovely. But I would love to open the floor up to any questions. If anybody did have a question, would like to raise their hand.
I've got one that I would love to ask while we're here. So, Vicki, I'm just thinking about my initial response to the Gladys Wilson clip and my work, intimate work in residential aged care. What would you say is the barrier to? And I'm thinking of fear here. You know, when you are wondering if you're in someone's space and whether it's appropriate, how do you personally read that? Like, what signals do you look for? I'm guessing it's very difficult to answer.
No, it isn't. It isn't. We teach that in our trainings because it's a critical factor in approaching another human being, whether they be oriented or not. How do you know if you're getting too close? And look what happened to all of your faces, right? I can see the tension around the eyes. I see that smile. It's like, if there is a sound that went with that smile, it's, right? So how do you tell? Now, how do you tell if I'm too far away? If I were going to do a lecture, this might be okay, especially if I was showing PowerPoints. You don't need to see me. But if I want to tell you about the last hours of my mom's life, if I want to share with you something very personal, this is way too far away. I can't do that. Do you see what I mean? How do we learn that? Well, there's a number of exercises that we do, and I love, if we were in a room together, I would do the exercise with you in a heartbeat. And it's really fun because every human being has got a field of energy. And you know this because we feel it all the time. But if you can sensitize yourself to it and just tune, What Naomi does with Gladys, anybody can do. Anybody. You just need to tune yourself. Attune yourself, perhaps.
Attunement.
What I love in the Gladys video is she moves in and tries to touch Gladys. Gladys pushes her hand away, and Naomi says, "Oh, you don't want me to touch you." What she's doing is verbalizing the nonverbal behavior and respecting it. And she starts pretty far back, you know? And then slowly, and then Gladys is the one who pulls her towards her. So she's moving with the same rhythm and the same, she's pacing Gladys. She allows Gladys to be the leader. Does that answer your question? Sort of?
Sure does.
Okay.
Oh, hang on, sorry. It sure does. Thank you.
Do we have any more questions out there? Because I actually have one myself, so I'm going to chuck my hand up just in queue, but I'll let anybody else jump in before me.
Aaron popped up a hand.
Yeah.
I think again.
Yes.
A man with lots of questions.
I will jump in with mine. So, Vicki, thank you for just a beautiful presentation. And there was one point that you said that anybody can do this and working through the validation method and really hearing people. However, I certainly have noticed that empathy point is a bit of a specialist skill. I actually think it's a hugely specialized skill, and I think that aged care nurses are specialists in their own right because of that, and we should have more recognition across that space. But do you have any tips as to how to hone those skills? I know further from what you've already shared today, which is beautiful, the choosing the moments that we can validate and the energy color exercise certainly was great. Any other points for aspiring empaths?
I'm torn between wanting to teach you all the validation method and simply saying, please take one of our courses. Because we've got training that's online, that's asynchronous, but also synchronous, blended learning, in-person learning. I think there are 5 key prerequisite skills that everybody can learn that builds towards person-centered care. And those 5 are centering. You got to be clear, because if you're not open to another human being, you can't see them. And that's the second step, observing. Can you observe the energy, the emotional tenor? My mom used to call it taking the emotional temperature. And then calibrating. Calibrating means adjusting myself to match what I have observed. And that's the step of moving into empathy. If I see a friend of mine, you know, I'm meeting her for coffee, and she goes, oh, my face immediately changes. I go, what's going on? It's not mirroring per se, it's calibrating, it's matching the emotional tenor. And that's how you move into empathy. Then finding the appropriate distance is number 3. Meeting on eye level and making eye contact is number 4. And using an adult to adult voice tone is number 5. Those 5 things have to be in place and automatic in order for you to really be person to person with another human being. And those are 5 skills you can use anywhere with your kids, with your husband, with your wife, with your anybody. It's just good communication. But those are the 5 skills that we teach in a couple of our courses, the more beginning courses. Then we like to, because everybody wants to say something, we've added in our 6 skill building blocks, ask, don't tell, where a lot of people don't understand the difference between validation and lying. For instance, they think, oh, if you validate, you're pretending to believe what the other person says is true. And that's not true. We never, ever lie in validation. My mom would get furious. She would say, I don't know how they can call it therapeutic lying. There's nothing therapeutic about lying to a person. She would really get very upset. And so the way I like to describe it is validation is the pathway in the middle with reality orientation here and therapeutic line or diversion on the other side. We don't agree with the person. We don't disagree with the person. We say, oh, really? What happened? Where? Who? What? How? When? Tell me more. Did that ever happen before? When does it not happen? We are in exploring mode. Those are verbal techniques, of course. And when a person is nonverbal, well, Gladys is the best example of that. So, does that help understand validation in relation to other methods?
Yes, no, thank you, Vicki. That was great. Thank you. Monique has just got her hand up, and then I think we've got a couple of questions in the chat from Pam and Aaron as well. So I'll just pass to Monique.
Yeah, great. And Dolph has his hand up as well, Aaron.
Oh, Dolph, sorry, Dolph.
Just in the, I thought I'll just share a little bit of news now that next year we actually have plans for level course 1 of the Internet Supported Validation coursework to be available. In the newsletter, we will actually have a link for expressions of interest and an overview, and we will share that in the newsletter, and then dates will be confirmed in the coming months once I've finished touring and we can lock in some calendar dates for next year. So, but we will absolutely have expressions of interest, and that will happen next year. So it's very exciting. Can't wait for that to happen. So I'll back to you, Aaron.
Thanks, Monique. Dolph, I might flick to your question and then I'll read the ones from the chat.
Okay, thank you. Of course, I'm very interested in the validation technique, not just that you speak excellent Dutch, but I am a representative of the Boehm method, and Erwin Boehm, and yes, and your mother knew each other. But I was interested, and that's not what I'm really sure of. All the examples we get from the validation technique is with people quite deep in that process of dementia. But are there tools in validation, and you are nicking already, yes, I'm glad with that, for earlier stages in dementia? Because we are trying to avoid regression, of course, in our method. And we are working with quite some principles of yours, but are there any specific tools for earlier stages of dementia in which people do communicate, but for instance, are not telling the truth because they are ashamed of becoming, well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The verbal techniques are used with people who are verbal. And there are a lot of examples of how that happens. And what I would like to refer you to are some of the YouTube videos. What do you do when somebody is in that first phase of, well, Mom called it the first phase of resolution. She thought, well, it's validation theory that people get to very old age with an avalanche of losses and that they feel a need to resolve the unfinished business of the past in order to die in peace. That's the resolution phase of life, which she sort of added to the Erickson life task theory. She was very inspired by Erickson.
As Brett was, yeah.
Yeah. So the answer to your question is yes, validation can be used with people who are in all four phases of resolution from the beginning, which she used to call malorientation, and we moved away from the labels. We dropped those a few years ago because people felt that they were labeling. And in fact, they were. It made it easy for us to talk about, oh, somebody is in phase one. But now we call it phase one. We dropped the titles and we used descriptors. Somebody who is in phase one can verbally communicate and is most of the time aware of person, place, and person. And every now and again confabulates to cover their losses. And that's what you mean by making up stories, that confabulation. That's the person who says, there's a man under my bed. I know you don't see him, but he comes every night. Or, you know, she stole all my jewelry. Or my daughter takes my money. That's typical examples of people in phase one. And oh yeah, they're fun to validate. At least I enjoy it.
Yeah, I agree absolutely, and I think that, and that is for everyone. I think that the validation technique has so much value on trying to get real interaction with people, and well, in our method we use it, but we also use the information about people's personal history with it, and those two combined are a hugely strong way of solving some problems, emotional problems in dementia.
Yeah.
That's what I like about it. Yes, very much. Thank you.
Biography is also a very important part of validation. Yeah. There's a lot of similarities. I'm not sure that I don't know enough about it to do a comparison. What I can say is the focus of validation is not to change the older adult. We accept them the way they are. That is an important principle. We also believe that if you validate somebody and give them space to resolve or to accompany them in that process, that it will stop. And that somebody who is in one phase of withdrawal will remain in that phase until they die. And I've seen that over and over. I've seen people go from nonverbal to verbal. I've seen my stepfather, who didn't know where he was. He recognized my mom, but not so much other people. And he stayed verbal and communicating. He did not withdraw inside.
I'm so happy you mentioned that, because that is really possible. That is what we see in our daily practice as well. And that is so much different from what people think dementia does. Yeah, absolutely.
It's not a disease.
No, absolutely.
It may be dis-ease.
Yeah.
Might just jump in there. We've got time for one more question that I might just read out, if that's okay. So sorry to interrupt, and then we'll wrap it up.
More than enough. Yeah, thank you very much.
Just the last question I'll read out today is from Pam Lane. Which sector are you finding the most receptive to the validation method currently? Meaning the support at home environment, working with the industry, allied health trainers, others, and how does this seem consistent across countries?
Oh gosh, what a hard question.
So,
I find that it's not so much the sectors in our industry, it's humans who are open to emotion, or humans that are a little more reserved. People who are more reserved will not feel comfortable using validation, and they shouldn't. Validation is not for every care provider, whether they're professional or not. You have to be comfortable with emotion, because that's where we meet people, in their emotion, in their needs. So, and also validation is not for every person who's got cognitive decline. That's validation, and it's a method, not just techniques, and not a therapy, because we're not going to heal anybody. We accept them the way they are. It's really a method for connecting and communicating and accompanying the person in their last stage of life. Is that a good answer to the question?
I love the answer. Thank you. Thank you, Vicki.
Okay. I would like people to, if your validation sounds simple, and I've heard a lot of people say, we use validation methods. My guess is you may, but I can't be certain. And I can't be certain unless you have some kind of training. And so those of you who would like to use this method in an accurate way, and if you want to use it with skill, then I would strongly recommend following a training of some kind. And I would like to support what Monique said. I'm very excited and hope we can fill this class because the certification level that we're offering, it's a long course, it's an intensive course, and by the end of it, we promise you will be able to validate individuals in all 4 phases of resolution, verbal and nonverbal, and will have developed an empathetic attitude. That's a lot to promise. And yet we have success with this course since 1991. So we have experience with it, and it's been online since 2019. So it's been proven, and if you do the work, you will develop the skills.
That's great. We've got the promise recorded now for everybody, so we have the guarantee in place. Thank you so much, Vicki de Klerk. Beautiful presentation, and I really support what you're saying about the mastery in the true method, because if we think back on Kitwood's term person-centred care, we know that that is not what is broadly used, and terminology and the names of different concepts and ideas can often be, distorted. And so there is a purity to the work, of course, and we acknowledge that. So thank you very, very much. A big round of applause, please, for Vicki, for a beautiful presentation and your work, and for continuing your mother's legacy. You do your mother proud. So I'm just going to ask Aaron to maybe give us a little wrap up before I hand to Monique to tell us a little bit. I think you're going to tell us a little bit about Keys to the Doors, perhaps, Monique. But first,
yes,
we'll go to Aaron
I have
first
to
for a wrap up.
there. Okay.
Sorry, I've got that
Yeah,
wrong.
I think Monique's doing the wrap up. Sorry.
Okay, cancel
Take my
the
job
wrap up.
away, Murray.
We're going to, okay, go on, Monique. We'll let you do it.
No worries at all. Well, look, I just think we all have absolutely feel that little bit closer to your mum, Vicki, from what you shared today of her story. And we don't have a lot of time. I wrote lots of notes, but I can absolutely promise you that we will be supporting you, everyone around the world, to ensure that validation continues, because it's so important and it's so needed. And I'm very excited for next year that we're going to be able to have that course available for everyone. So what else is happening? We've got lots happening here. Keys to the Doors. The date is to be confirmed. We're just finalising it, but we have going to have a Yes Means Yes, an open talk about sexuality. It'll be in mid-November. I know. So we'll have Dr. Now, I will probably be terrible for pronunciation, Nathalie Ultima. She's from Holland as well. It's all for the Dutch. Gwenda Darling will be joining us, and we will have another guest with us as well. So the details of that will be in the newsletter. Blog submissions. Please, if you've got anything that you'd like to provide, please submit. There's a link on the website, and we'll also have a little piece on that on the newsletter. Everything will be in the newsletter, won't it, Rhiannon? We'll get it on there. And Michael's tour, as I said, we've still got a few cities and states to go. So we're in Canberra the next couple of days. If you are Canberra based, go to lonelynomore2024.org. Maybe someone could pop that in the chat for me, would be great. So there's still tickets available, as I said, for Canberra, Hobart, Adelaide, Darwin. Oh, I forgot Melbourne, and Perth, which is really exciting. And what else have we got on this list? So it's Michael's. Next month's Open the Doors will be on November the 12th. And we'll have Michelle Olsen and Monica Eastman joining us. They're environmental gerontologists and apparently all-round amazing human beings. So I look forward to them joining us. Maurie's organised that one, so I'm sure it will be entertaining and lots of information for us to take on board. And then in December, very exciting, we've got Dr. Nigel Payne joining us. That'll be our last one for the year. Nigel Payne is a change-focused leader with a worldwide reputation and a unique grasp of media, learning, development in the public, private and academic sectors. Myself, Murray, Nicole and Michael Page, we all, Aaron, I think you were there too, weren't you? We were really lucky enough to be able to spend some time with Nigel last month. And I think his video is available on the website that people can go to, and we'll include that on the newsletter for this month as well. There's lots of news. We also have Susie Singer-Carter, her documentary, No Country for Old People. We're going to have a special Open the Doors in November as well. We will be able, they call it the sizzle reel. Both Susie and Rick will be joining us, and that will be a 25-minute run of their documentary and some Q&A with Susie and with Rick as well. So lots of things happening. What else we got? And that's pretty much it from me. Everything I've mentioned will be in the newsletter. Any questions, don't hesitate to drop us an email as well.
There's not a lot going on, Monique. You've been really quiet there.
And the dog was jumping up at me wanting its dinner. Thankfully, someone else sorted that.
Yeah. Okay, so is there anything to wrap up on? Thank you, Monique, very much. And I think, is Michael going to Amsterdam? Everyone's in Holland. So is Michael going to Holland this tour? No? You're thinking.
No, yeah, I know. I don't know.
Look at you planning.
Ask that question.
Mm-hmm. Aaron, is there anything that we want to say in our wrap up?
No, I think we're good for a wrap up. Monique's covered all of the massive happenings going on. I just want to say a huge thank you, Vicki, from all of us here again. So lovely to hear your presentation today. Obviously, your mother's work that has touched us so much. We're all immense fans here, obviously. And so I just want to say, thank you again. And
Thank you so much, Vicki, and everyone for attending our beautiful Open the Doors community meeting. Just a reminder, if you do have a blog or you want to submit something, please go to the website or via the newsletter, which will be out shortly. And of course, don't forget to join us I'm very excited to bring Michelle Olsen and Monica Eastway together as the eco-gerontologists. So that will be coming up for November 12th. Thank you very much, and thanks to our guest speaker. And remember that today's meeting is recorded so you can review. Over and out.